I never believed in ghosts. That's probably how every horror story starts, right? The skeptic who laughs at every strange noise until something happens that tears that smug disbelief apart. That was me. I was the one who scoffed when people said their house was haunted. I used to binge-watch true scary stories on YouTube at night and think, they're all made up. That changed when I moved into my new apartment last year. It was in a small, quiet building in a rundown part of town. The rent was suspiciously low and the landlord seemed way too eager to get me in. But I didn't care. I was broke and desperate, and the place was actually pretty nice for what I was paying. Hardwood floors, big windows, and a view of the alley. It had that old building charm with cracked paint and creaky doors. But nothing too bad. The only weird thing was the ceiling. There was a square patch in the middle of my bedroom ceiling, like a hidden crawl space or attic hatch. But the landlord told me not to worry about it. He said that goes up to an old maintenance crawl. No one's used it in years. Just keep it closed. I shrugged it off. I figured every old building had strange quirks. The first week went fine. I unpacked, got used to the sound of the old pipes and the neighbors' footsteps. But after a few nights, I started hearing something new. Faint scratching sounds above me. At first, I assumed it was rats or raccoons. It was an old building after all. But it wasn't the sound of scurrying. It was slower, more deliberate, like something dragging itself across the wood. I'd be lying in bed around 2 or 3 a.m., and the noise would start. Scrape, scrape, followed by a long pause, then another scrape. I remember one night I got so fed up that I grabbed a broom and slammed it against the ceiling, yelling, "Knock it off!" The sound stopped for about 10 seconds, then came 3 taps in response. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. That wasn't an animal. That was communication. I laughed nervously and told myself it was just the pipes or something, but I couldn't sleep after that. I turned on the light, stared up at that stupid square in the ceiling, and swore it looked a little different, like the edges were darker, as if something had been touching it from the other side. The next morning, I told my landlord about it. He looked uncomfortable. "There shouldn't be anyone up there," he said. "That crawl space is sealed off. It's just insulation and dust." I asked if maybe an animal had gotten in, and he promised to send maintenance to check it out. No one ever came. The scratching kept happening. Some nights louder, sometimes softer, but always there. Then came the smell. It was faint at first, like old meat or something rotting in the walls. I tried to ignore it, but within a few days it got unbearable. The odor was strongest right under that ceiling hatch. I stood on my bed with a flashlight one night and stared up at it. The metal latch had rusted and there were smudges, like dirty fingerprints and around the edges. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I decided to open it. I dragged my old desk chair onto the bed, climbed up and slowly pushed the hatch upward. The moment it opened, the smell hit me full force, like a dead animal had been left up there for months. I gagged and almost fell off the chair. My flashlight beam caught movement, just a flicker, and I heard a wet, sticky shuffling sound. Something moved away from the light. I slammed the hatch shut and nearly broke my ankle jumping down. I didn't sleep at all that night. I called the landlord again first thing in the morning. He didn't answer. I left 3 messages. I even went down to his office, but it was locked. That day I noticed something new. Around the base of my bed, little bits of white dust had fallen. When I looked up, I realized the corners of the ceiling hatch had new cracks, fresh ones, as if something was pushing down from the other side. That night, the noises were worse. I swear I heard breathing, not the kind you hear through walls, and it was close, just above my head. Shallow, raspy breathing. I held my breath and listened. It mimicked me. When I inhaled, it inhaled. When I exhaled, it followed, like it was mocking me. At some point, I must have dozed off out of exhaustion, because I woke up around 3:30 a.m. to a soft thud. The hatch was open. I blinked, thinking I was dreaming, but it wasn't my imagination. The square was hanging slightly ajar, just a few inches, enough for the darkness inside to look like a mouth. Something was dripping from it. Thick, dark liquid ran down one corner and landed on the floor beside my bed. I couldn't move. I just stared as a pale hand, too long, too thin, reached down through the gap. The fingers twitched and pressed against the air as if feeling for something. Then it pulled back and the hatch slowly closed with a dull click. I didn't sleep again that night. I packed a bag the next morning and stayed at a friend's place. When I went back 2 days later, I found a note on my door from the landlord. It said, "Maintenance complete. Issue resolved. Please do not access the ceiling crawl space again." I opened my bedroom door, half expecting the ceiling to be fixed. The hatch was sealed, completely nailed shut. But there were fresh scratches all around it. That night, I tried to convince myself it was over. I played music, scrolled my phone, and forced myself to relax. Around midnight, I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "Why did you lock me in?" I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I typed back, "Who is this?" No reply. Then I heard it from the ceiling, a low, rasping voice. "Let me out." I ran. I ran barefoot into the hallway, down the stairs, out of the building. I didn't stop until I was halfway down the street, shaking and crying. When I finally calmed down enough to call the police, they sent an officer to check the apartment. They didn't find anyone. But the officer looked pale when he came out of my room. He said there was blood, dried and flaking, all over the inside of the crawl space. And bones, human bones. They told me later the apartment used to belong to a man who disappeared 10 years ago. Maintenance workers found his body up there months later, partially decomposed, and sealed it shut. The landlord knew. I moved out the next day. But sometimes when I'm alone in my new apartment, I still hear it, that slow, deliberate scrape above me. And when I turn off the light, I swear I can smell that same rot, faint but unmistakable, as if something followed me here. I used to work the graveyard shift at a little roadside diner called Red Hollow. It was one of those places you only notice when your gas tank's almost empty and you're too tired to keep driving. A neon sign buzzed all night long, half the letters burned out, so it usually just read Rehlo Dine. I started there in 2018, back when I was broke and desperate. The diner sat right off a long, empty stretch of highway in rural Arizona, surrounded by desert on all sides. The kind of place where the wind never stops and the stars look too close. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Most nights were dead quiet, a couple of truckers, maybe a drunk or two from the next town over. I'd spend hours just cleaning counters and listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator. But there were rules. Every night when I clocked in, the old manager, Ray, reminded me of them. He was this wiry man in his 60s with a permanent scowl and a raspy voice that sounded like sandpaper. He said, "Never let anyone in after 3 a.m. if they're not already inside. Don't answer the payphone near the window. It hasn't worked in years, and whatever you do, if you see someone standing out by pump number 3, don't acknowledge them." The first time he told me that, I laughed. I thought he was just trying to freak out the new guy. But Ray didn't laugh back. He just looked at me with this tired expression and said, "You'll understand soon enough." For the first few weeks, everything was fine. I worked with an old jukebox playing country music, mopped floors, served coffee, and watched the occasional coyote wander past the parking lot lights. But one night, late September, things got strange. It was 2:45 a.m. I remember because I was counting down the minutes till 3. The diner was completely empty. I was wiping down the counter when I heard the payphone ring. At first I froze. The sound was jarring, this loud, old-fashioned metallic ringing echoing through the empty diner. I looked around, half expecting Ray to jump out and yell "Gotcha," but he wasn't there. The payphone hung near the window by the entrance, dusty and unused. I'd never seen anyone touch it. It rang again. And again. Finally, I walked over. The closer I got, the colder the air felt. My breath started to fog. I picked up the receiver with a shaky hand. "Hello?" There was silence. Then a voice, a woman's voice. Soft but wrong. It sounded like someone trying to speak underwater. "He's behind you." I spun around so fast I nearly dropped the phone, but no one was there. The diner was completely empty. I slammed the receiver down and backed away, my heart pounding. The phone rang again. I didn't answer it. At exactly 3:02 a.m., I heard the door chime. I turned toward the entrance and unfroze. A man was standing outside the glass door. His clothes were tattered and dusty, like he'd crawled out of the desert. His skin looked stretched. That's the only way I can describe it. Like it didn't quite fit right. He didn't move. He just stood there, face half hidden by the shadow of his hat. The lights above pump number 3 flickered, and I realized he was standing right next to it. The rule: don't acknowledge them. My brain screamed at me to look away. But the man just stood there unmoving, his head tilted slightly as if waiting. Then slowly he lifted his arm and pointed directly at me. That was enough. I ran into the kitchen, locked the door, and crouched behind the freezer. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I stayed there until dawn, listening to the soft buzz of the diner lights and praying I wouldn't hear the door open. When I finally went to check around 6 a.m., the man was gone. But there were footprints in the dust outside. Bare footprints, and the payphone was off the hook. When I told Ray about it later that morning, he didn't look surprised. He just nodded and said quietly, "You saw him." I asked who the hell him was. Ray sighed, rubbed his temples, and said, "That thing's been hanging around here since before I bought this place. Some nights it's a man, some nights a woman, sometimes just a shadow. It shows up after 3, always near pump 3, never comes inside unless you let it." He leaned closer. "Don't talk to it. Don't open the door. Don't even look too long. It wants to be seen. That's how it gets in." I didn't want to believe him, but I couldn't unsee that figure. A week later, Ray called in sick. He told me I'd have to handle the whole shift alone. I almost quit right then, but I needed the paycheck. That night started quiet. Midnight came and went. Around 2:30 a.m., the power flickered. The jukebox died. The fridge clicked off, and the only light came from the buzzing neon sign outside. Then, the phone started ringing again. I stared at it, shaking. "Don't answer," I whispered to myself. "Don't answer." It stopped. Then faintly from somewhere outside, I heard it ring again, the same phone but from the parking lot. I crept to the window and peeked out. There was a payphone standing near pump number 3. I swear to you, there had never been one there before. It was ringing, and next to it went the man. Same hat, same too tight skin. Only this time he was smiling. He waved at me. I ran to the back room and grabbed the shotgun Ray kept under the counter. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely load it. Then came the sound of metal scraping. The front door handle was turning. Slowly, deliberately. "Go away," I shouted. The scraping stopped. Then from behind me, the kitchen door creaked open. I spun around, but the lights flickered and went out completely. I was standing in pitch darkness. Something moved in the kitchen. Soft footsteps, wet and uneven. I raised the gun, my breathing ragged. Then I heard it, right behind me, the same watery voice from the phone. "You look too long." The next thing I remember is waking up in the diner parking lot as the sun was rising. My head was pounding, my uniform was torn, and the shotgun was gone. The front door was wide open. Inside, everything was spotless. No signs of a struggle. No footprints. The payphone was gone, both of them. Ray showed up around 7 a.m., looking pale as death. He didn't even ask what happened. He just said, "You shouldn't have stayed past 3. I quit that morning. A month later, I saw a post online, a grainy photo of Red Hollow Diner burned to the ground. The report said it caught fire around 3:17 a.m. No one was inside when it started, but if you zoomed in on the picture, at least on the version I saw before it was deleted, you could just make out a figure standing by what was left of pump number 3. It was smiling and it was waving. I used to live in a house that had a basement door that wouldn't stay locked. That doesn't sound like much of a horror story, right? Just a broken latch or a loose frame. That's what I thought too, nearly for months. But I need you to understand something. That door was never supposed to open. When I moved into that house, it was the cheapest rental I could find, a 2-bedroom place on the edge of a small town in Pennsylvania. It had peeling paint, an overgrown yard, and this heavy old-fashioned charm. The landlord was an older woman named Mrs. Kearney, who spoke in that overly pleasant tone that felt rehearsed. When she showed me around, she avoided the basement. "Oh, that's just storage," she said, smiling too quickly. "The previous tenant sealed it off years ago. You won't need to go down there." The door to it was in the hallway between the kitchen and the living room. Plain wood, thick, with an ancient-looking brass handle. A chain lock hung loose across it. I remember noticing deep scratches around the frame, like someone had tried to pry it open from the inside. "Who sealed it?" I asked. "Oh, just a contractor," she said, waving her hand. "Old wiring. Nothing dangerous, just best to leave it be." Something about how she said best to leave it be made me uneasy, but I didn't question it. I needed the place. The first few weeks were uneventful. I got used to the creaks, the smell of old wood, the occasional flicker of the lights. The only thing that ever bothered me was that damn basement door. It wouldn't stay locked. I'd close it before bed, slide the chain tight, double-check the handle, and in the morning, it would be open. Just a crack. At first I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I wasn't closing it all the way. So I started taking pictures on my phone before I went to bed, proof that it was locked. By morning, the chain would still be latched, but the door would hang slightly open, just enough for the darkness beyond to show. One night I decided to test it. I pushed a chair under the handle before going to sleep. Around 2:30 a.m., a thud woke me up. A soft, dragging sound echoed from the hallway. I sat up, holding my breath. Then came the creak, slow and deliberate, of the chair being moved. My blood turned to ice. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and crept toward the door. The hallway felt colder than it should have. My breath fogged as I got closer. The chair had been pushed aside. The chain was still latched, but the door was open, and something was moving in the dark beyond it, a slow, wet shuffling like bare feet on concrete. I slammed the door shut, pressed my back against it, and heard, faintly, breathing. It was right on the other side. The next morning, I called Mrs. Kearney and told her what happened. She was silent for a long time. Then she said quietly, "It's been years since anyone lived there who noticed." "What does that mean?" I demanded. She sighed. "The man who owned that house before me, he had a brother. They say he went missing. But the police never found a body. He was odd. Stayed in the basement most nights working on something. When he disappeared, the smell got so bad they had to seal it off." I felt sick. "You're saying there's a body down there?" "There was," she said, "but the concrete was poured over it. It's just an old story, dear. Try not to think about it. Try not to think about it." Right that night, I slept with every light on. A few days later, the smell started. It wasn't constant, just little bursts of it, like a draft carrying something foul. It smelled like rot and damp earth. I'd catch it when I walked past the basement door. Then came the knocking, always between 3:10 and 3:20 a.m. every single night. 3 knocks, slow, heavy, thud, thud, thud. I tried recording it once, but whenever I hit record, the noise stopped. One night I snapped and screamed, "What do you want?" No response, but the next morning, carved into the wood of the door, deep, jagged scratches, were 3 words: "Let me out." I lost it. I called Mrs. Kearney again, demanded she come over. She arrived later that afternoon, looking paler than I'd ever seen her. When she saw the words on the door, she just whispered, "Not again." I asked her what she meant, but she wouldn't look at me. Finally, she said, "Every tenant hears it. Every one of them. And everyone thinks they're the first. But the door's been there longer than the house. The foundation was built around it. That didn't make sense." "What do you mean longer than the house?" She didn't answer. She just left, muttering prayers under her breath. That night I decided I was done being afraid. I was going to open it. I set up my phone to record, grabbed a flashlight, and unlatched the chain. The air that came out was freezing, like stepping into a refrigerator. The smell was overpowering, thick and sweet and rotten. I pointed my flashlight inside. The beam caught concrete steps leading down into the dark. The walls were covered in handprints, black and greasy, smeared like something had been clawing its way out for years. Halfway down the steps, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. There were fresh footprints in the dust, bare feet, small, and they led up, toward me. I ran. I slammed the door shut, latched the chain, shoved a heavy bookcase in front of it, and locked myself in my bedroom. I didn't sleep. Around 3:15 a.m., the knocking started again. But this time it wasn't from the basement. It was coming from inside my room. 3 knocks, soft, deliberate, from the closet. I sat there frozen, staring at the door, too terrified to move. My phone started vibrating on the nightstand. It was a text from an unknown number. "Why did you open it?" The closet door creaked open on its own. I ran out of the house barefoot, sprinted down the street, and didn't stop until I reached the gas station a mile away. When I came back with the police the next morning, the basement door was wide open. The bookcase had been pushed aside like it weighed nothing. The air inside was dry, stale, no smell at all. The officers went down with flashlights and came back up after a few minutes, confused. "There's nothing down there," one said. "No other rooms, no tunnels, just four walls. Solid concrete." I showed them my video recording on him, but when I played it back, it was just static. They left shaking their heads, telling me maybe I was overtired. That night, I packed everything and left. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Mrs. Kearney. Her voice was trembling. She said the new tenants had moved in, a couple with a young daughter, and now every morning they find the basement door open. The little girl keeps asking them, "Who's the man that whispers from the stairs?"